This is augforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered and independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. First, thank you to our sponsors, Repay, DataSelf, and Velixo. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention two more things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, I'm always looking for victims, guests, on the podcast. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out AU and click the link near the top of the page to learn about being a guest on the podcast. Second, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out the instructions at augforums.com/Rolodex to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021, and this is episode number 55, acuCONNECT 2021 Session Introduction. For those who don't know what acuCONNECT is, it's an organization that primarily, I believe, run by ISVs, although also some VARs and some customers. And acuCONNECT is an Acumatica community. And acuCONNECT is an Acumatica community. And there's a little event this week, online event, and I'm giving a presentation. But I only get 30 minutes, so I thought I better not try to do an introduction or I'm going to talk too long and not have any time left for my presentation. So instead of doing the introduction during the session, I'm just going to let everyone know about this podcast episode, and you can listen to this if you'd like for an introduction to who I am and what I do. All right, so here's my introduction for you acuCONNECT 2021 folks or anyone else who's listening. My name is Tim Rodman, and I run a website called augforums.com. This is also where I do the podcast. And it started about 2013 when I was first learning Acumatica. I started blogging kind of accidentally, and it was mainly as a way to take notes publicly as I was learning Acumatica. Since then, I've worked in multiple different Acumatica consulting capacities, including at Acumatica Corporate, for a VAR, and also at an Acumatica OEM partner. Now, for the past year, almost exactly a year, I've now been independent, just focused on reporting in Acumatica. So just doing independent consulting focused on that area. But through all this time, I've kept augforums.com going as a side project, although it wasn't always augforums.com. First it was perpetualacumaticalearner.com, and I actually got an award from Acumatica back in 2014 I don't recall if it was called Acumatica Summit yet, but it was basically an Acumatica Summit type event. And I've got it right in front of me. It reads, Tim Rodman, Perpetual Acumatica Learner, 2014 Community Spirit Award. So this was before they had the MVP award, and it was given to me as a Perpetual Acumatica Learner. But then when I learned that you're not supposed to have a trademark name in your website URL, I changed it to timrodman.com, since I couldn't think of anything more creative that didn't have Acumatica in the name. Although, as I say that, for a period of time I did have it to acumaticareports.com, Can't remember exactly when I did that, but even back then I was most interested in reporting. So I had acuMaticaReports.com for a while. So you can see I've changed the name a few times, but always kept the blog going. And then in May of 2017, I added online forums to what was timrodman.com at the time. And those forums became pretty popular, so popular that 2 years later, on June 2nd, 2019, I went and looked up the date of the email. Acumatica agreed to promote my forums if I moved the site from timrodman.com to augforums.com. At the time, Acumatica was very interested in Acumatica user groups, and augforums.com was going to be promoted as an online gathering place for user groups. But Acumatica never followed through on their promise, because 25 days later, less than a month, on June 27th, 2019, Acumatica announced that they had been acquired by EQT Partners, a private equity firm headquartered in Sweden. So rather than promote augforums.com, in September of 2020, about a little over a year after getting acquired, Acumatica created their own online forums at community.acumatica.com. And I think they did this because EQT Partners owns another ERP software company called IFS, and John Roskell, the CEO at Acumatica, has made comments about how Acumatica and IFS are sharing resources. And if you look at both community.acumatica.com and community.ifs.com, scroll to the bottom on those websites, and you'll see that they are both running on the same forum software platform called Incited. So the forums at community.acumatica.com have been running for a little over a year now. And if you look at the stats, the vast majority of traffic, which makes complete sense, is now on that site. Although, to be honest, I'm perfectly happy with that, because I was having trouble keeping up with monitoring things on augforums.com. So much less traffic now on augforums.com, much more manageable. I'm at least able to look at every post and make sure that there's not spam stuff, and delete anything that's, that you'd be surprised at how many bots and things just create complete garbage in forums. So there's some management that has to be done, but it's very manageable at this point, which I'm pretty happy about. 2 years ago, in November 2019, I added this podcast that you're listening to right now. And this is where I'm putting most of my public content effort at the moment. I found that with blogging, I definitely really enjoy that, but it takes a lot of work. For me, it's probably 4 to 6 hours to put together a blog post, especially when it comes to documenting something that involves screenshots. It's just a lot of effort. Now, it's a lot easier on you as the consumer to be able to read through something, because your eyes can consume written information a lot faster than I can talk and you can consume me. But it's a lot less effort on my part to be able to just put out podcast episodes. So I win in that battle because I'm the one doing it. And this has been a lot more manageable. I get to talk to a lot of different people in the Acumatica community, learn some things myself, and hey, why not make the conversations public so other people can learn some things as well. And then it's also a way for me to do a podcast episode like I'm doing now, which is putting out some information rather than having to sit down and type it out and spend more time putting it into a blog post. I did experiment this past year during the pandemic with an Acumatica customer, Ryan Brown. He was the CEO at a company called XByte that uses Acumatica. And we called it augforums.com live. We experimented with live broadcasting on YouTube, and it was kind of fun. It was interesting. We got to have some interaction with the audience via chat. We liked it better than the traditional webinar because it's just wide open, and anyone can see what anyone types into the chat. And it's not that one types into the chat, and it's not that kind of closed door webinar mentality where you never know if there's anyone else watching it except for you at the time. And it was kind of fun, but not quite as much work as putting together a blog post, but it still required some prep and still more work than the podcast. Ryan was the one mainly who was doing it, the prep work, but he just finally made this information public, I think within the past week, that he now has taken another opportunity. So he's no longer at XByte, and he's no longer at a company that uses Acumatica. So he will definitely be missed. Thanks, Ryan, for all the effort you put into those live broadcasts. And I think for now, I'm just going to pause the live broadcast. There might be an opportunity to do that for certain things in the future, but I'm just focused on the podcast for now. I mentioned that I do on augforums.com, but before I do, I'm going to back up a second to the forums. And I think through that process of trying to get buy-in from Acumatica, even getting an agreement from Acumatica that they would promote the site, they were going to promote it actually at the next summit, and working with Acumatica and trying to navigate who's really in charge of certain things there. I think some things that I learned. One is that I'm actually glad that they've got their own forums, because you've got Acumatica employees monitoring those forums. You've got developers looking at that information. You've got Acumatica's ear directly on their forums. But I think I also learned that you never know what's going to happen on the business side of any software company. Either Acumatica was going to get acquired. You just never know. And, even right now, we're a little over 2 years past that acquisition. I don't know, but I would guess typically in these deals that the leadership team has some kind of buyout provision, right? They need to stick around for maybe 3 to 5 years. So it's hard to say, how much longer will that core leadership team still be there, including John Roskell at Acumatica. And, if you look at any other ERP software company on the market, it's always a moving target. The leaders come and go, management comes and goes, and, things change. And so bottom line, I just don't think it's that reliable when building community to purely rely on Acumatica for it. And that's just based on my experience being around ERP software for about 15 years now. And I'm in this for the long haul. I've built skills on the Acumatica product, and I want to leverage those skills for the long term. And it's just a different situation if you've got equity in Acumatica. You've got to make the right business decisions, right? And that could involve exiting the company if it makes sense financially. So it's just different priorities. And so for me, community is very important. And I should specifically say independent community is very important, because the way I look at it, it helps to keep Acumatica honest. Acumatica has been a great company so far, but if you look at pretty much every ERP software company on the market, there's always at least, maybe they're not doing what's in the best interest of the community, because they're a business. I mean, they have to do what makes sense from a business standpoint. So that might mean, for VARs, it might mean to maintain your margin level, you need to sell more deals, and next year even more deals to maintain your margin level. For a customer, that might mean you see the prices start to increase more than you'd like, or maybe features start to get broken off and charged extra for. And that's just the way it works. It is a business, and it needs to be run that way. But I think when you have independent community, it does help, not completely, but it's a help to keep Acumatica in check, or keep any ERP company in check. So all of that to say about the forums, that .com. I think if you got questions about Acumatica, I think your best bet is at community.acumatica.com right now. But we never know. That forum site is, I think, the second or the third attempt by Acumatica to create an online community. Now, this one sure seems like it's going to stick, but you just never know. And at some point, maybe it's not public anymore, so that maybe the content couldn't be indexed by Google anymore. You just never know. Who knows if John Roskell's not around in a couple of years, you have a new CEO who wants more control over the conversations, it could change community.acumatica.com. Just never know. So I'll keep augforums.com, I should say specifically the forums on augforums.com going as an independent place to post things about Acumatica. I have no contractual relationship with Acumatica. I'm not a VAR, I'm not an ISV, so you can be as transparent as you like. It's not going to put me in any kind of awkward position when you're posting on augforums.com. But, the traffic, again, mostly now on community.acumatica.com. Although, I am working on an idea for February of next year to start a local user group here in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm located. And I've got some ideas, and I'll share that with anyone else who'd like to try starting a local user group. I've got some ideas for how to make it sustainable, and I'm basing my ideas loosely on Alcoholics Anonymous and how they run there, which sounds maybe a little bit odd, but stay tuned for more on that if you're interested. And with that, part of the idea is that I could help with augforums.com to give you a private forum for connecting with just people in your area, putting out announcements for your next in-person meeting, and just helping to bring the multiple user groups together internationally in one common place. So, we'll see where that goes. I'm kind of reigniting that effort. User groups have been in the hands of Acumatica now for over a year. They made a big splash at the summit in the beginning of 2021. Of course, then we've had the pandemic, so that could be a factor, but there really hasn't been much movement. So I'm just going to give it a shot and do one in my area and share lessons learned. And anyone else interested in local user groups, we could collaborate on how to move user groups forward in our own local areas. So the forums could be utilized in that effort. Otherwise, they're there for now, and they'll be there in the future if Acumatica forums go private, not accessible to Google, or maybe something else happens there. We'll keep the forums going at augforums.com. But the podcast is where I'm putting most of my public content effort for now. Now, I've got two other things to mention, and these are now things that are paid things. Since I'm now independent, augforums.com is not just a side project anymore. This is my full-time gig. So the two things that I'm doing to get paid, one is just billing by the hour, building reports for companies who are using Acumatica. And that could be dashboards, that could be pivot tables, that could be generic inquiries, could be report designer, it could be the ARM financial report writer, any of those out-of-the-box reporting tools in Acumatica. That's all I do, is reporting in Acumatica. So I'm not a jack of all trades, master of none. I'm just focused in the reporting area and only for Acumatica, not other ERP products. But in addition to the Acumatica reporting tools, I also do a fair amount of work. I would say an increasing percentage of my work is with Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Power BI. The out-of-the-box Excel and Microsoft Power BI. The out-of-the-box reporting tools, in my opinion, in any ERP product, not just Acumatica, they're not really designed for what I would call analytical reports. Even though the ARM Financial Report Writer, ARM stands for Analytical Report Manager. All it does is report on the general ledger and the project ledger. It's not a real analytical tool, in my opinion. And dashboards look great, but if you get into dashboards, you'll discover that a lot of times you need to write a SQL view to deliver the information you want, because the calculation capabilities are just not that strong. So a lot of times I'll kick things out to Excel or Power BI. There is a way to embed Power BI back into Acumatica, which makes it seem like your Power BI reports are right inside the menu. You even control security inside the menu, information that you've never been able to create before. So I am doing an increasing amount of work with Excel and Power BI, but I also work with the out-of-the-box reporting tools in Acumatica. Then the last thing I'll mention is online training courses. So my goal is to launch my first course by the end of the year. I was actually pretty well on my way to doing that last year, or I should say early last year. Then COVID hit and juggling kids and work put that on the back burner. But that effort is back on. Goal is to launch the first course. It'll be on generic inquiries and pivot tables by the end of this year. And I'm still really interested in courses, because I think a lot of times in our industry, you're just paying by the hour for consulting time, but a lot of what you're doing is educational. There's a book that I really like by a guy named Peter Block. The book is called Flawless Consulting. I'll actually put a link in the related links on this episode at augforums.com/episode 55. You can take a look at those links. You'll see a link to my notes from this book. Great book on consulting, and not just IT consulting, but just consulting in general and the consultative process. And he has a great quote in there where he says that consulting is primarily an educational process. And why is it then that we don't have more packaged consulting content packaged in online courses? I don't know, but I'm very interested in that area, because I think it's a great way to really think something through, deliver it in an online course format. And my course is less than 10 minutes, so that you can get, if you've got 10 minutes, you can get through a lesson. And building a course is a good amount of work. I've been learning over the last couple of years. I've tried different avenues and wasn't happy with how it turned out, so went back, and now I've got what I think is a pretty good process that works for me. But it is a lot of work to think something through. It's not just a random off the top of your head like this podcast episode. It's more well thought out. You have to come up with specific examples. You have to, the exact formulas you're going to use, especially since this is on generic inquiries. There's a lot of bases to cover, and it's a lot of work to think it through. But why not do that upfront work and then charge a fee for access to that course? And then you can get packaged consulting that's well thought through and educational in nature, not just a one-on-one phone call. I think there's definitely reasons for both of those, and reasons to use online training course for some things, and then of course you still have a need for one-on-one consulting to troubleshoot specific problems. But I do think there's a solid place for online courses in our industry and with Acumatica. Now for me, since I'm into reporting, and also because there's no way I could cover the breadth of the Acumatica product, I just plan to focus in the reporting area. I'm starting with generic inquiries and pivot tables. Next, I'm not quite sure. Maybe report designer. More likely, though, I would just do Excel, because I think there's a lot with Excel and OData that you can do using Power BI functionality that people don't even know about. But bottom line, I'm interested, very interested in building courses, and my goal is to launch the first course on generic inquiries and pivot tables by the end of this year. So I've got 2 months left to deliver that. So those are my two paid things, consulting and courses. So that's my almost half an hour. I'm almost at the half an hour mark here of this introduction. You can see now why I did not do this in the acuCONNECT session. Otherwise, you would have had no session, just me giving an introduction. I'll close here with some general thoughts on community. And I'm also going to put some links in the related links on this episode page with some other interviews, some other podcast interviews that I've had specifically focused on community. And I discovered back when I was working with Great Plains, which is now Dynamics GP, that's when I first discovered community and the power of community, learning from others. I would just Google search things, and there were a lot of bloggers had blog things about Great Plains, and it was a huge help to me. Saved me a lot of time and learned things that I never would have come up with on my own. So I really like community, and the way I look at it, though, is the community is not a place. The community is the people. So some people want like one destination to go to for everything Acumatica, and in my opinion, that'll never happen. You've got the community.acumatica.com website, which is good for certain things. You've got the acuCONNECT community, which is good for certain things. I'll keep augforums.com going. I'm getting back into the local user group game. I think that'll be good for certain things. There's a ton of different blogs from different VARs out there across the world. There's all sorts of YouTube videos that you can look through. There's content in so many different places. And so to me, it's not about a specific place. It's about the people. And when people ask, well, which website should I join? My response is always, why not join all of them? It only takes a few seconds to create an account on any one of those sites. Just join them all, and you'll get a feel for which sites are good for certain types of information. And one thing I'm learning about community too is that it's not really a profession. It's more of a hobby. At least it is for me, and I think it is for most people. I'm reading another book from Peter Block right now. The book is called Community: The Structure of Belonging. And I'll put a link to that book in the related links on this episode. But he's got a great quote in there. He says, "As soon as you professionalize care, you have produced an oxymoron." And he's specifically talking about the medical area, but I think it's also applicable to an ERP community. That a lot of times with communities, you're doing it as a side thing, and it helps you develop professionally. It helps you learn things for whatever your specific job is that you get paid for. But the community interaction itself is not really a money-making enterprise. So those are some of my philosophical thoughts on community. And I'll just end with this. If you don't yet have an account on augforums.com, you can just head over to augforums.com and click the register button in the upper right. That'll tell you what information you can send to me so I can create your account for you. I used to let people create their own account, but man, there were so many spam bots that would get in there, and the Google reCAPTCHA thing that I did, that didn't reduce them. So rather than fight that battle anymore, I just have you send me an email with some info, and then I'll create the account for you, and you'll get an email back. So if you don't yet have an account, do that, go out to augforums.com, click that register button, and I do send a monthly email newsletter to everyone who has an account. That's the newsletter to everyone who has an account. That's the main way that I'm updating people right now on my efforts on local user groups. And I put some other stuff in there as well, including I usually do a video every month on highlighting a new feature in Acumatica and some other stuff. So check that out if you're interested. Get an account created by clicking that register button in the upper right-hand corner of augforums.com. All right, so that does it for my half an hour intro. And for those who did not attend the acuCONNECT session, also check out this episode page at augforums.com/episode 55. And I'll put a link on there to what I think eventually I'll have a recording from the session, I'm pretty sure. But I'll also send a recording to another session I did that I had more time to go through essentially the same content. And then you can also download if you're logged into the site with your invitation. All right, well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of augforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening.